Good morning, everybody. This is our earliest Under the Dome session. And as I said, when we first jumped on, it's interesting to see who are our early birds. And it is as I suspected. So welcome this Wednesday morning. We are really delighted. This is our sixth Under the Dome session. And I just want to remind everybody that if you're going to ask a question, to please put it in the chat box and message me directly all throughout the program, and we'll get those questions answered. I do also want to take a minute to thank our sponsors for the series. They are H&TB, Goodman Corporation, EHRA, and Memorial Hermann Hospital System. So thank you so much to our sponsors for this series, and also thank you to our mobility partners who are our continued partners throughout the year and really support everything that we do. So without further ado, I want to get started with this hour. We are so delighted to have Chairman Drew Darby with us this morning from House District 72. He was first elected in 2006, so he's a seasoned representative and chairman. And I had forgotten this, but he was formerly vice chair of transportation in, I think, the 2011 session. Was that Chairman Williams?
I was vice chair, and I can't remember, quite frankly, who the chairman was. But
I felt bad. I couldn't remember. So
I think it was, I think it was in the 2011 session, but I can't recall right now who the chairman was. Well, there's been so many years past.
Yes, you have quite a resume here. So also currently serving on Energy Resources and Licensing and Administrative Procedures, formerly chair of Energy Resources for 2 sessions, served on the Legislative Budget Board, chairman of the House Committee on Redistricting. The resume goes on and on and on. So without further ado, we welcome you today, and we look forward to talking with you during this hour. So Chairman Darby?
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. It's a pleasure to be with all the early birds. I have found during my business life and personal life that if you can get up in the morning and get the day started, you tend to get more done. So I'm kind of an early bird, and I appreciate TAG accommodating our schedule. I've always been a huge proponent and advocate for transportation. I characterize it when I visit with folks. I say I'm from West Texas. I'm from San Angelo, and we don't have a very busy airline hub in San Angelo, Texas, and certainly our seaport there in San Angelo is not very busy. But the only way we get our goods and services, our hide and hair and food and fuel to market is with roads. And so I had during my business career, I had close relationships with those in the transportation industry. And so one of the reasons I ran for the legislature back in 2006 was to be a strong advocate for transportation funding, because I realize that is the lifeblood, certainly for our urban communities and those represented by TAG. But my rural district and those in West Texas, North Texas, East Texas, South Texas, all of us depend upon good transportation system in order to function and live and enjoy the resources of this state. Resources are not located typically in urban areas. They're located in rural Texas, and we have to get those to market. And so, again, my support for transportation funding goes long and deep. I can recall for the first 8 years in my service here in the House, I was on appropriations, and I was fortunate to chair the subcommittees on Article 6, 7, and 8, and I was able to divert funding for roads and kind of articulate the reasons why we need strong highway funding. I think that work paid off. I filed a bill. You might be interested to know, and part of the subject matter that we'll talk about today is legislation regarding increasing funding for transportation. And you wouldn't think a rural Republican would file a gasoline tax increase and a registration fee increase, but I did so. And I had the registration fee increase a bill on the floor of the House, and I had it passed. And interestingly enough, while I was arguing the merits of that bill, members were coming up behind me and whispering in my ear that the governor of the state, Governor Perry, was in his office calling members off the floor, his boots up on his desk, and saying, "I'm going to veto Drew's bill if it passes." And so they're urging me to pull the bill down. They didn't want to take a bad vote. And I wound up doing just that. But the reality is, it set up the discussion, the next session, for a meaningful way to fund roads, and that was through Props 1 and Prop 7. And so I was fortunate to work with Chairman Pickett and others during that period of time, Tommy Williams in the Senate, and we were able to get that referendum to the voters, and clearly it passed by overwhelming margins. And so we are reaping the benefits of that effort. I think most legislation requires coordination and planning and teamwork and laying the foundation, if you will, for future initiatives that will take hold and grow. So you may not get it done this session, but if you have a longer view of the issue, then those opportunities are there. So I'm a huge supporter of that. I commissioned during that process TTI study on the cost of doing nothing. I wanted them to demonstrate to my colleagues that if we don't do anything, the hidden cost of transportation, congestion would and does increase the price of goods and services on our store shelves. And then we used a can of tomato paste, and I had TTI break that down on what part of the cost of a can of tomato paste was actually a congestion cost, transportation cost. And so as a consumer, when you pull that can off the shelf, you're paying a hidden cost for bad roads and poor connectivity and increased transportation costs. And so I think all of that kind of plays into the narrative that this group wants to urge the legislature. Clearly, part of my assignment this morning would be to tell you what's happening in the Capitol. And I will tell you, I personally last week, as I'm sure a lot of you on this call this morning, were without power. I was without power and without water for a number of days. In fact, we had some Houston refugees come. We were confined here in Austin. We could not get back to San Angelo, but we had our daughter and her husband and two little babies come out of Houston. They did not have any power or water, and so they drove on roads. As harrowing as that was for Grandpa and Grandma, they got on the road, and with the road system that we had and the hard work of TxDOT employees and others, they were able to slowly make their way to Austin. And about the time they got to Austin, we again had another power outage and we lost power. So it was a traumatic experience, and there were people across the state. This was a tragedy of unparalleled magnitude. It affected the whole state. There were deaths. There's been disruption of everyone's lives and their businesses because of that disruption. And I think I'm on the Energy Committee, and we're going to have a hearing starting tomorrow with the State Affairs Committee on into the reasons for this crisis that we've had to endure, and hopefully we can have some lessons learned by that and learn how we as legislators and statewide leaders can be better at oversight and instruction and guidelines for our agencies to administer our electric grid. Clearly, we've seen the importance of a stable, reliable electric grid. I think one of the concerns I have is that we've had an event that shakes our very foundation about who we are as Texans. We take pride in the fact that we're independent. We take pride in the fact that we have our own grid. We take pride in the fact that we have some of the cheapest electric rates in the country. And, we've attracted massive companies to come to our state, from Tesla to Oracle to Facebook. You can just list the companies that have come to Texas because of those reasons, and among them is a reliable electric grid. And so I worry about this event has shaken the very foundation of our pride in Texas, and how we've got to restore that. And that's going to take the effort from everyone. Some of these lessons learned are going to be painful. Some of them may cost money. Clearly, weatherization is at the top of this issue. But how do we make it more reliable? How do we make the market more affordable? And we can't pass these costs on to already burdened consumers. And so how do we balance all that will be a discussion that we've started this week, and we're going to continue that discussion with ERCOT and with the PUC and Texas Oil and Gas Association and all the generators and the retail providers, and all of that is going to come before these committees starting tomorrow. So it's amazing how your priorities and perspective changes. When we last left the session in May of 2019, we had almost $4 billion in the bank. We didn't spend it all, or $3 billion in the bank. We didn't spend it all. We funded our roads, our schools, all the priorities, and we still had money left over. Well, by the time 2020 was initiated, then that cushion was dispelled, and we had a deficit, and we all endured COVID. And so I thought that the emphasis would be getting our Texas economy jump started, and how do we get Texans back to work, especially the oil and gas industry that suffered unparalleled demand destruction and pricing fluctuation. So how do we get Texans back to work, and how do we keep Texans safe, and how do we talk about these issues in safety for ourselves and for our staff? All of that was what we thought we'd be working on. In 2020, we thought that to protect the funding we already had for transportation, make sure that Prop 7 and Prop 1 were not rated to pay some other priority of Texas. But now that focus in the weeks in 2021 has changed again dramatically. And so I honestly don't know if there's any oxygen left in the building for much other than making sure that Texans are protected, making sure that they're safe, and we have a reliable grid system to rely upon, and we have safe water, and good roads. And so it's going to be an interesting session. We are already on day, I believe, 97 out of 140. We've got 97 days left. If you start looking at if we have a slow process anyway, the system is designed to kill bills, not pass bills. So the legislation is there. I'm not seeing a real appetite to, begin the process and really move forward on a lot of issues. A lot of bills have been filed, certainly a whole lot less than in years past. There has been no bills referred to committees yet. And so I don't know what's going to happen. I anticipate we're going to crank up, and when we crank up, we're going to go real fast. So we want to make sure that good legislation passes and we kill bad legislation. So I know I've talked probably more, Andrea, than 10 minutes, but
okay.
I certainly want to give everybody on the call the opportunity to ask questions. I know there's a lot of them out there for you. Hopefully I can give you some guidance and answer some of your questions. But everybody's scared. Everybody's concerned. They've been shaken to the very foundation of who they are and what their families, what's important to their families, and so the job of the legislature is to try to refocus this state and get things done. So hopefully we can do that.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And I think what I appreciate in your comments is the history that you've brought to the conversation of a lot of work that's been done prior sessions. And I appreciate that because we do, we have a session every other year. And so I think sometimes between those 2-year spans, people do forget kind of how much work gets done during the session. And so talking about all the heavy lifting to get the props 1 and 7, and you were talking about that story when you had that bill on the floor. I remember that, and that was significant. And so, but it seems that that certainly seems ages ago now, and all that we've experienced as a world and as a state in the last week, right? So, but it's good to remember that, and we certainly appreciate and have such gratitude for the work that was done during those sessions that really did lay the groundwork for funding transportation, and we are continuing to reap those benefits from both of those propositions. I hear you for sure about this session, and certainly now after last week. I mean, if we didn't already have something to focus on with COVID and a distraction from entering a multitude of bills and passing a multitude of bills, now we have even more priority with our grid issues. And so it makes me think about a comment that was made by I think a senator early before session saying, choose wisely, right? So what you bring forward, choose wisely, because it's going to be a very, very limited discussions about things. And I think even more so now after last week. And so I think what I would ask, kind of an opening question of you is, given that kind of sage advice and knowing that a priority for us is to keep transportation funding, right? And we see so far that seems to be being held in the budget. Beyond that, there are other things that have been discussed, right? You mentioned many sessions ago, gas tax increase, right? Vehicle registration increase. We know the political will is really not there for that. Certainly now, probably more than it was even back then when you had it on the floor. But there is a conversation about alternatively fueled vehicles and what that's doing to kind of the gas tax revenue and how do we address it. So I think we can all agree that something needs to be done, but I'm not certain that we've agreed on the how. And so I would just welcome your thoughts on that issue.
Well, thank you. And I agree. We need to look at that because those electric vehicles take up just as much of the road and do just as much damage to the roads as a combustible engine does. And so when we think about everyone paying their fair share, clearly those type of vehicles do not pay through gasoline taxes what most motorists pay. And so there is a sense of fairness that we need to address, that they need to pay their fair share for the roads and damage to the roads. And so the debate will be not only how do they do that, but how much should be their level of commitment. One of the advantages of having been around for these 16 years in the legislature, I've seen the discussion go down many avenues, and one of the concepts that I've always thought had merit, and maybe it has merit now and maybe it doesn't, is vehicle miles driven. And I know, and again, this is decades old information, but Oregon kind of set the pace a number of years back on transitioning to a vehicle miles driven model. And so scanners, when you renew your license, you make a representation about the miles you've driven, and your registration fee is calculated on that amount. One of the myths that had always prevailed in rural Texas where I'm from is that we would be disproportionately charged for use of the roads. That is not the case. The studies show that folks in urban Texas drive more miles than the folks in rural Texas. You drive more miles to your doctor, your grocery stores, your restaurants, and that sort of thing than the rural folks do. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done, but I would suggest that that might be a concept that everybody can get behind. It's not just the type of vehicle you have, it's how much use do you have. And so I, for one, have always suggested that maybe we look at the number of miles driven. Granny that drives 5,000 miles may not and should not pay as much a registration fee for her vehicle as I should pay for mine. I put 30,000+, maybe 35,000 miles
Right.
on my vehicle a year, and I certainly through certainly gasoline tax, I pay my share through that, but my registration fee is the same for Granny's vehicle. So so I just think we need to look at that. I think it's worthy of discussion. I know Ken King has a bill. I have not actually studied that, but I would be supportive. I think his fee is maybe $200 for electric vehicle. I don't know if that's the right number or not, but I know Ken, and he's a great lawmaker, and we'll have a very vigorous discussion on that. But I look forward to that discussion. I think we need to have that discussion. So.
Right. And we actually were able to speak with Representative King, and he admitted, said, I am introducing this legislation. I know that the final product will not necessarily look like this, that this will be a start to the conversation. And so I think there's going to be a Senate version that's going to come out. And then I don't know, Chairman Canales, I know, is looking at kind of a comprehensive package, kind of to what you were saying, where it's a larger conversation, right, about how we're assessing fees and revenue for transportation.
Well, I mean, everybody on this call knows that we've not adjusted the gasoline tax since 1985, and we haven't had any meaningful registration fee increases since the early 90s. So I think it's a long overdue discussion. People will say that, we've addressed transportation funding through Prop 1 and 7. As I said on the floor of the House during the debate on those issues, this will not fix transportation funding. Do not go home and tell people that if you vote for this fixes transportation funding, because it doesn't. It simply addresses some long-standing needs. It is a piece of the solution, but we need to look at a whole lot of other different things. And so I'm kind of an all of the above. I think there's no single silver bullet to solve any of this. This is a piecemeal puzzle of things with registration fee increases, perhaps motor vehicle sales tax, things that we can cobble together to add to the extreme significance of adequately addressing transportation funding.
Well, we have another question kind of in follow-up to that. One of our board members and our former board co-chair, Jeff Collins, is on and had a question. Jeff?
Chairman, glad to see you again. Thank you for joining us today. A quick question in regard to that. One thing we did not do for the gas tax a long time ago was we didn't index that. Right. And I do agree fully with you that we need to go to vehicle miles traveled. The big issue, as we all know with that, is people think that's government following them around and knowing where they're going and everything. So that's a big issue. So, but as a mid-step with the alternative vehicles, hybrids and electric, should we look at indexing that fee? So as that number grows and starts replacing the gas tax vehicles, we do have a built-in index there And, that's, we don't have it on the gas tax, but should we look at maybe indexing that one? So as that number grows in the future, we don't lose ground.
Well, I agree. I mean, certainly thank you for your question. And I agree. Anything we implement should be indexed. I mean, it clearly time changes all of the economic models that we have today. And the idea that we would have another dip into the well at some point in the near future is not going to happen. So I think we need to, whatever we pass, it needs to accommodate changing economic times and circumstances, and so the new number would reflect the current economic buying power, purchasing power of the dollar. I mean, clearly dollars in 2021 are not the same dollars as they were in 85 or 91. Construction costs have clearly escalated during that period of time. And so we just need to recognize that as we move forward. But yeah, to answer your question, absolutely. I think if we're able and fortunate enough to pass anything, it needs to be indexed so that we don't have to address a recurring problem with outdated figures.
Thank you, Jeff. Another question we had, I know Mayor Joe Zimmerman was on. I'm not sure if he's still, oh, yes, he is. I know he had a question as well. Mayor?
Well, first of all, Representative Darby, thank you for your service. And also, you addressed a little bit of registration and inspection fees. Do you think there's the political will to get that done this session?
No. I think all the oxygen has been sucked out of this building. I mean, to tell you the truth, I just don't, anything that increases costs. As I was on the floor, and again, I think this was maybe in 9, I asked for a $10 increase in registration fees, $10. And I had members coming up to me, one I'm not going to name, but from Texarkana, said, my folks can't pay an additional $5 registration fee on the vehicle. I know times are tough and people have been through the ringer, but I don't think there's a will, if you will, to increase those costs and for folks right now. I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully, we'll have a change of direction, but I just think all of this is going to be. I don't want to say shoved to the side of the road, but it's just going to be a very difficult session. And you add redistricting. Mm-hmm. There was a discussion yesterday among some caucus members, and we're realistically planning for primaries to occur in May late May of next year. We won't have primaries in March. We'll have primaries delayed till May. The runoffs in those primaries would occur in September with a general election to follow in November. There is no oxygen in this building other than budget, addressing these power outages, and addressing redistricting. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I've got some good legislation I'd like to try to pass, but there's just not a political appetite to heap more on folks. I mean, there's going to be a powerful discussion on what went wrong on our power grid. There's going to be a powerful discussion about the failure of the state, in effect, to have an insurance policy to pay for generation to sit on the sidelines to wait until times of need till we can pull that generation capacity out. But that capacity comes at a cost. Weatherization comes at a cost. Who's going to bear the cost of those? I mean, some of the folks on this call, I bet, are receiving some exorbitant electric bills. If you're not, haven't already received them, you're going to. Certainly your cities, I see some city councilmen on this call, your cities, the city of Weatherford was expecting a $300,000 bill, and they got a $3 million bill.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's going to translate down to your cities, but when your city councils and mayors and administrators, managers gets those bills, there's going to be a hue and cry that you can't imagine. And so how do we sort that out? How do we see what's legitimate? And how do we see how do we tell whether the markets were distorted intentionally for profit taking? And what is a fair return? So when you start separating all of that out and who's going to pay for it, I don't think there's a appetite for much more. I really don't. And certainly I don't think there's time for much more.
So I appreciate that. And I think, well, maybe it's not the answers that we want to hear. It's a good reality check. And it's good to kind of keep everything in perspective. And I think when you're going through, it's not just how do we protect the grid moving forward, it's how do we pay for what happened? I mean, I think people probably don't understand them. Some, not everybody, don't understand the magnitude of that impact, and really whose shoulders does it fall on to kind of make those decisions in a time when it's already really difficult to hold a
My
session.
advice to TAG and to advocates for whether it be transportation or schools, play defense. Try to keep what you got. Right. I mean, I think with a struggling economy, but it has truly outperformed what people thought it would. I mean, we have a very resilient economy. I don't know what this power outage is going to do to businesses. They were closed a week, and certainly our sales tax collections and motor vehicle sales tax collected. If we can keep what we got, if we can continue to fund our roads and our schools, then I think that is a huge victory. It's a huge victory. And so I'm not saying set your sights lower. I'm saying set your sights realistically.
Right.
And my advice to you would be make sure you keep what you got and play small ball. And I say small ball. I'm looking at a list of bills that have been filed, and maybe there are things in there that can pass and go to local and consent calendars and get out and be done and signed by the governor. But by and large, play defense, keep what you got, and try to look for opportunities to maybe hit a button single or at least get on base with the wall.
So in kind of thinking about that, we talked about a 140-day session. Do you anticipate that you all will have to go longer?
Well, there were comments made yesterday that if we don't get some of these priority items done, then certainly special sessions would be in our future. I've told my younger colleagues, go ahead and get your apartment leased for the whole year. I am not retracting my statement on that, even though the census numbers are not going to be delivered to the state until September of this year. So we're not going to begin. We're going to begin the redistricting process, but we're not going to be able to come to any sort of conclusions and agreed maps until sometime in November at the latest. That's why we're going to push back probably the primaries and that sort of thing. So is there an opportunity in the summer, early fall, to focus on other issues, priority issues that were not achieved during the regular session? Maybe, but I'm prepared to stay the whole term, the whole year, and perhaps into next year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems it's a significant lifts before last week, and now there's just another, kind of say it's a ball of rubber bands, right? And so how long does it take to unravel all of that? I do appreciate your comments too, talking about political will, the reality of the session. I think my question is, even beyond this session, right? So if we're playing defense this session and we're trying to think about conversations we want to start and lay groundwork for the next session, or for a miracle of sorts where something actually gets through, I think when we talk about the bill that you had on the House floor, the $10 increase vehicle registration, there's conversations around kind of talks about that local control, right? The local versus state, and the state just enabling localities to be able to do some of these things. Another one is exempting transit agencies from the sales tax cap. That's one that's I believe is going to get filed in the House shortly. These are all things that are not mandated by the state, but enable, the state can enable localities to then go and ask for a vote of their local citizenry. And I guess my question is, if there has to be, if there's a vote that's attached to the bill, do you think that that has a better chance? Or do you think that it still is just a really tough conversation? I think I'm just trying to understand, if you're asking the people what they want and they voted in, I don't know how, how is that still so controversial?
Well, I mean, clearly, measures that require confirmation from the voters is always supported to a greater extent than decisions that cost constituents money and they don't get a chance to weigh in on it. So I'm a former, in my past, I was a city councilman, so I understand the struggles. I see Council Milliken on the call this morning, but there's another struggle that we have here that we've not talked about, and that is the struggle between larger cities, local control, and certainly a state mandate or will. I'm always comes down on local control. I'm a huge supporter of local control. I have supported the ability of cities and counties to govern the affairs of their folks, as long as they do not intrude upon the statewide importance. One such example was House Bill 40 that I passed in 2015, which sets the clear line of authority for cities versus the oil and gas industry to regulate the production of oil and gas and the completion of oil and gas. If you recall, the city of Denton said through ordinance that you can't frack wells within their city limits, and that effectively condemned the minerals under that city. And so my bill set a bright line and said if it's below the surface of the ground, then the Railroad Commission and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality have purview to regulate that. But if it's above ground, and this had never been set in statute in Texas, we set rights into statute that cities have the ability to regulate noise, traffic, air, all of the lights, all of that. City councils have the ability to do that. It had never been in statute before, and we put it in statute, but they can't enforce ordinances or regulations that are designed to prevent oil and gas exploration. And so we've tried to balance the struggle between local control and what is clearly a state wide importance issue. That's the production of oil and gas and development of oil and gas and minerals under property. So that's kind of a long way of coming back to saying that I do think that initiatives that maybe require local consent. I noticed part of your executive summary said maybe a 1% additional sales tax, let locals control that. While I may support the idea, I just don't think in this session there's going to be a political will to allow even local governments to create more tax burden upon their citizens. And so I'm just one member. Don't want to discourage this group from pursuing what you think is important, but I would just tell you from my perspective, I think it's going to be an uphill slug.
I think most of our conversations, whether, like you said, they support it in the idea or the concept or the theory, it's a general consensus that it's a tough climb, right? And so I think when we talk about transportation funding, and some of the dire situations of the state, I think we also kind of have in our other part of our brain about it that when we invest in transportation, it is job creation too, right? And so I think I think it is it's both sides, right? Where we talk about a burden, increasing taxes or fees, but then it's, oh yes, but we also need job creation and economic recovery. And so I think, so to your point about being on the defense and absolutely holding on to what we have, that's critical for many reasons. One of which is obviously jobs that would continue to be on the line. But then I think as we think about additional funds, it's, I put like a little equal sign next to it, and I have, how many jobs does this create and what is the economic return, which is usually pretty significant for transportation. So, but certainly these are big lifts, and I hear you, for the political will and just certainly everything that everyone's experienced over the last year. The timing of it, can be challenging. You talked about kind of, I think you said soft pitches or small things that we can small ball. Thank you.
Ball.
And I don't know if this falls in that category, but certainly safety, right, is another big issue that we tackle with transportation, whether it's, the amount of fatalities on our roads, or it's, reducing speed limits in residential and urban areas, which is a big piece of legislation that they're trying, and I know it's going to try to move through. I think there's a couple of different versions that have been filed. But really giving cities the protection and the opportunity to reduce those speed limits and residential neighborhoods. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at those yet. If not, we just kind of want to encourage those conversations, because the difference between a 30-mile-per-hour and a 25-mile-per-hour can be the difference between an injury and a fatality in those areas.
And I agree with you. I've not looked at specific bills in that regard, but I will tell you, as a father of 5 children, and 4 sons and daughters-in-laws and 9 grandchildren, anything that increases safety for the folks who live and work in Texas is something that I will eagerly look to and support. So it's got to make sense. We've all endured growing up. I remember going through the city of Benbrook, and they had a speed reduction that caught my family every time we went through the city of Benbrook. And so, I have a natural aversion for speed traps, but if there's a reason for health or safety, then certainly I'll support that. But just as a potential revenue stream, I might not be as supportive.
Right. No, I hear you about that. We definitely know there's a few between Houston and Austin. So,
Exactly.
Yes. I wanted to go back to a comment that you made in your opening remarks about the TTI study. Was that, I'm not sure, was that the 2030 assessment, or were you talking about a different study that was related to some of the work that you had done?
It was a different study, but it may have been in part I've read clearly that 2030 study, and
Okay.
that's the emphasis that we used to pass Prop 1 and Prop 7.
Okay.
But this was a different study, and we can kind of track that down, but clearly everything on the shelf of a grocery store reflects the cost to get that can and get that product to that shelf. And
Right.
but it's hit, but there's nevertheless a cost of it. And so what this study showed, and I would hope that you could get that from TTI. We can find that, but it talked about what the costs are today.
Okay.
And if we invest in our transportation infrastructure, how the ultimate cost over the passage of time to the 2030 period, it would be significantly less if we invested X number of dollars along the way. But if we don't invest anything, it's going to be a huge number. And it had it broken down between rural and urban. And clearly, those numbers were staggering. If you just have more and more people using the same amount of roads with no improvements to them, then the congestion is going to reach the point where affordability on our goods and services would be very difficult. And so The study was designed to show if you'll invest just some money into maintenance and, of course, to improve connectivity and improve capacity, then you can bring the ultimate cost of those products down. And I think it is a concept that you as advocates can use to show we're paying for it. You know this, we're paying for it. We're in lost wages. And the study talked about what it was like, how much delay would be an average businessman and in getting to work and getting home from work. And so I think the concept to use is if we invest in our transportation infrastructure and then we bring down the ultimate cost to consumers. Yes, it may cost more in a registration fee or certainly gasoline tax or severance taxes or whatever mechanism we're using, but ultimately by making that investment, we reduce the ultimate cost of our goods and services moving forward.
Right. And so, well, luckily Tim Lomax with TTI is on the call. So he just messaged me and said he'll send that report right over. So
Good.
That's service. I like that. So I'll send that out.
I love TTI. I don't know who's on the phone, but they do a great job and I'm very supportive of what they do. And it's given me ammunition from time to time to be able to advocate for these important issues.
Yes, no, it's a great wealth of knowledge. And I know there's also the report that the DMV put out for electric vehicle. So for all that conversation, there is really good data. And I think sometimes for transportation and for funding and things like that, even getting a study commissioned is a win. I know last time that was super helpful to get at least a study created for electric vehicles and just kind of assess what is the actual amount of people that are using them and what does that look like. So I know AJ Wadaki has been curious about something on your desk. AJ, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, Representative. First, I want to say thank you. I know that as a veteran legislator and having been on the Transportation Committee for a while, you've got the scars of Prop 1 and Prop 7 and been in there fighting with us, and we greatly appreciate that. I couldn't help but notice on the desk behind you, and I wondered how many of the youngsters on this call recognize that office tool on your desk behind you on your left shoulder there.
Oh, you're talking about the pencil sharpener? Is that what you're noticing?
Yeah, yes, sir. I've been staring at it ever since you got on. So
well, that's a relic, but it actually works. And occasionally I do have a pencil, and I do have a piece of paper. Sometimes it's lost in these new technology friendly folks that you can do some work with a pencil and paper. And when the electricity goes down or their computer goes out, they just throw up their hand and say, well, I can't do any work. I said, no, we did a lot of work with a pencil and paper and a slide rule from time to time. So we sent a man to the moon from Houston, Texas with a slide rule. So
absolutely. We appreciate the hard work you've done and getting us where we need to, well, we are right now, I guess. And like you said, we need to play defense and keep what we got. And thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks. AJ he always brings a little bit of levity to our conversation. So we appreciate it.
Well, good. I'm glad we talked about the pencil sharpener.
Yes. One item that I don't we covered in great detail is tolling. And that's something that's going to be part of a conversation, whether it's relevant or not this session, or whether it's a priority or not. In fact, I know I saw Senator Kolkhorst filed a tolling cessation bill this morning.
I don't get it. I mean, I'm going to interrupt you right there. I don't get those type of initiatives. I'm in favor of them. From time to time, I go visit my kids, and I can remember. Heck, I'm young enough to remember the Katy Freeway being torn up in the 60s, early mid 60s, trying to go down there with my family. And I've been on the Katy Freeway and stuck on what they call a speedway there, or tollway that was nothing more than a parking lot. And I had a chance to turn off on the Sam Houston tollway, and I can remember I didn't care what that toll was. I just wanted to get off of the Katy Freeway. And I'm one of these guys that is, again, all the above. I think we need to have that tool in our toolbox. I think the reason why there folks in the Metroplex and certainly Houston pay for tolls and pay more disproportionately than most people, it's because they can. They want to use them. They have options, non-tolled options, but they choose to get on that tollway because it gets them to where they need to be faster. And I think to ignore that tool is ludicrous. I'm still put out by the commission taking every last category 12 dollar we had, discretionary dollar we have in this state, and improving the Central Austin corridor. If there's a toll viable corridor in America, it's downtown Austin. Now, there are no toll opportunities in San Angelo or West Texas. We just don't have that kind of traffic. But we all drive toll viable areas in this state, and we should have that tool available. So I don't understand why you just simply remove that. They're popular. They're popular, and they work.
Right.
And they move transportation projects forward faster. So I'm a huge proponent of that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I know Michelle McSude with Dannenbaum probably has a follow-up question to that or comment. Go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I was, you stole my thunder, so that's good. I appreciate your position, Mr. Darby. But really my comment is more about, I like AJ Widaki's background because of the beach. And every time I look at Jeff, I still have Jeff Collins background. I still get the heebie-jeebies from all that snow. I'm ready for not seeing snow for the next couple of years.
Michelle, if you notice, there is a snowman on the beach behind me.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it. I see it now. Okay.
That's
That
unbelievable.
was last week during the storm.
Very good.
Well, it's not a picture of Cancun, is it?
Oh, that was good. That was well done.
Oh, that was Galveston representative.
Okay.
Too funny. Well, we appreciate the tolling support. I think our biggest thing is that we just never want to take anything out of the toolbox. And certainly I know Larry was on, I think, I'm not sure if he still is, but that was something, Grand Parkway, that was really well along in the execution of that project and has a tolling component. And I know last 2 summers ago, we really had to come together and really advocate strongly to keep that part of the project moving. And so Larry says he can make a comment. So Larry, I'm going to go ahead and tip it to you.
Thanks, Andrea, and thank you, Representative, for all you're doing for the state of Texas and your years of service. The comment, and it's very welcoming that you make that statement. We have options. The good thing about the Grand Parkway system, just as we saw the success with the Sam Houston system, is that the Grand Parkway system already has a contract between TxDOT, Harris County, and the surrounding counties. It's a done deal. All we're trying to do as a region, and TAG has been an excellent supporter of that, is to fulfill that contract so that those monies that people choose to use, those monies that are generated, stays within the Grand Parkway system and continues to complete that system. Not only to move us around for our jobs and those types of things, but for the things that you talked about earlier, freight, moving goods and services from places to places, whether it's through the Houston region or through our ports. So that's one of the key things that we've been communicating with the Transportation Commission, that there is an existing contract completed. We're just trying to fulfill that contract as a group and as a region. So thank you for your support.
Yeah, I would certainly support that. As I supported when 121 was converted into a tollway and 3.5 billion, 3.2 billion, we agreed should remain with the North Texas Transportation Authority up there. That money should stay in the area and be used to support transportation projects in that region. So agreed. I think the Grand Parkway is a wonderful initiative, very supportive of that. It's going to create economic opportunities for all those surrounding counties, not only for Harris County, but all those surrounding counties. And so whatever we can do to, keep those dollars moving to support those folks in that area, I would be supportive of that.
Thanks, Larry. I want to close with just a question. I know I did take a quick glance at some of the bills that you filed already for this session, and I didn't know if there was ones that you have filed or you plan to file that you just are, passionate about or just kind of want to address with this group.
Well, I thank you for that. I will say of all the bills that we've were contemplating filing, I served as chairman of the House Committee on Mass Violence and Public Safety. And so we looked at gun issues and those events. But, that it's amazing how our focus has been redirected, if you will. And so I filed a bill. When I first came to the legislature, we talked about the CREZ project to build almost $8 billion worth of transmission lines to West and North Texas. And the comment was made, if you build it, they will come. But there was no power generation at the end of those lines. And so I was concerned that they may never be utilized to their full capacity. Well, the reality is they have been. And even though some would claim that renewables and other gas-fired plants failed, I would say the facts dictate otherwise. But we have now congestivity and curtailment in our power grid. One of the constraints that contributed, if you will, to our power failure was the fact that we did not have enough capacity, transmission capacity. So I filed a bill, I think it's House Bill 1607, to have PUC look at our transportation capacity and do we need to expand that capacity? Certainly there are projects in the Houston area, right, and South Texas that have power generation, and they have failed for lack of transmission ability to get them to the generators. And so we need to take a look at that and the economic model associated with how the PUC evaluates future transportation projects. It's such a long-term prospect, 10 years or more. We need to shorten that time frame and get these projects on the ground. It's kind of like roads. These are electric roads, if you will, and we need to look at our capacity, a road system for electricity.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's very helpful to know. If you have just kind of one more minute, Chairman, I did see Dr. Carol Lewis is on. I don't know if she's available, but I would like her to talk about, there are two pieces of legislation that are, again, we talk about the small balls, and I think these fall in that category. Dr. Lewis, are you on? Or Catherine? There she is. Okay, wonderful.
Good morning. Nice to see you this morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
The thing that Andrea was talking about, I'll be honest, I've been sitting here listening and corresponding with our executive director, thinking that the conversation this morning has not been very encouraging to us. I represent Gulf Coast Rail District. It's an organization here in the Gulf Coast region. All of our Harris and basically 5 of our surrounding counties are members. And we have 2 focal points. One is to do commuter transportation from sort of the suburbs and outlying counties into the urban area. And then we do at-grade rail crossings. So this year we've got a couple of items going in. One is to allow us to use utility right-of-way and hold those agencies, in our case, CenterPoint, harmless if we put a transport, like a BRT, or bus rapid transit, in their right of way. And then the other, our enabling legislation actually names only commuter rail as an option for us. And so we're wanting our nomenclature expanded to include bus rapid transit and other high technologies or automation that may be forthcoming over the next several years. So those are the things we have coming in. Of course, with all the things that are on the plate and on the table and all the emergencies we've got, it's like with every sort of 10 minutes of talking with you, I was like, duh, 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 duh. But anyway, just to let you know that that's what we have coming out.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I don't want to be overly pessimistic or certainly discourage your advocacy, because that is not the case. I want you to continue to do what you do. You need to make your issues known to your elected representatives, and certainly, but I will tell you that good legislation is built layer upon layer, session after session. So what you may not get done today, you may get done next time. So I would just urge you to continue to do that.
I think I'm gonna sell it as those are small things. Those are small balls. That's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
They are small.
Words. We're just tweaking words.
Exactly.
Let's just pass that and get us out of your hair. We'll just, if you just give us this little small thing, then we'll get out of your hair.
Exactly.
No
My
tax,
hope is that
no
they'll be
tax.
just little and they'll just piggyback on something and just slide all the way through. And before we know it, we'll get it got through.
That's right. Well, I always want to make sure
you.
that so when it comes, if it comes across your desk, Chairman, or you are already aware of some of these things that are kind of percolating. So
yeah, most appreciated. We're not asking for any money. That's the good thing.
That's a very good thing right now. And so that if you can ask us for something other than money, that might be a possibility.
Right, good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everybody today, and Chairman, especially for your time, all of the time that you've invested in transportation over the years, and that you'll continue to work hard.
Still an important issue. Still important. I will always be a transportation advocate.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate all the work that you're going to be doing this week with energy resources. You will be busy, and we really appreciate that you are so committed to that conversation and to finding some real solutions for us. So with that, I know you have a hearing that starts at 10. And so we're gonna let you go, and we again appreciate it. We look forward to future conversations. And for everybody tuning in, we have 2 sessions tomorrow. In the afternoon, we have one with Senator Charles Schwartner and TxDOT Executive Director James Bass after that. So we'll be busy with more conversations. So thank you again, everybody, and stay safe and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.